And now Leroy will read our scripture.
The scripture today is from Esther, chapter 1, verses 1 through 22, and chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. This happened in the days of Ahasuerus, the same Ahasuerus who ruled over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in the citadel of Susa in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his officials and ministers. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were present, while he displayed the great wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and pomp of his majesty for many days, 180 days in all. When these days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in the citadel of Susa, both great and small, a banquet lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white cotton curtains and blue hangings tied with cords, fine linen, and purple to silver rings, and marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and colored stones. Drinks were served in golden goblets, goblets of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. Drinking was by flagons without restraint, for the king had given orders to all the officials of his palace to do as each one desired. Furthermore, Queen Vashti gave a banquet for the women in the palace of King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abatha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs who attended him, to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing the royal crown in order to show the peoples and the officials her beauty, for she was fair to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command conveyed by the eunuchs. At this the king was enraged, and his anger burned within him. Then the king consulted sages who knew the laws, for this was the king's procedure to all who versed in law and custom. And those next to him were Kashina, Shethar, Admatha, Harish, Marish, Marsina, and Memucan, the 7 officials of Persia and Media, who had access to the king and sat first in their kingdom. According to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti because she's not performed the command of King Ahasuerus conveyed by the eunuchs? Then Memucan sat in the presence of the king and the officials. Not only has Queen Vashti done wrong to the king, but also to all the officials and all the peoples who are in the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen will be made known to all women, causing them to look with contempt on their husbands, since they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she did not come. This very day, the noble ladies of Persia and Media, who have heard of the queen's behavior, will rebel against the king's officials, and there will be no end of contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal order go out for him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it may not be altered, that Vashti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another is better than she. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, vast as it is, all women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. This advice pleased the king, and the officials and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script, and to every people in its own language, declaring that every man should be master in his own house. Chapter 2, Esther becomes queen. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint commissioners in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem and the citadel of Susa under custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetic treatments be given them, and let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This pleased the king, and he did so.
Thank you. That's some story, isn't it? Imagine, if you will, what is happening in this story. We have a king who rules a huge kingdom. And he decides, after 3 years of ruling this huge kingdom, that he needs to have what we might call a cultural fair. And this lasted for 6 months. Everyone in the kingdom was supposed to come and see all his stuff, because we're proud of our stuff, right? And if you're the king, you have lots of stuff. Some of the stuff that they talked about, we've never even heard of. I looked up some of those things. Some of the pavement was precious stones. Makes you kind of wonder how many people in the kingdom were starving, just so he could have precious stones on the sidewalks. Everyone in the kingdom is invited to see this expanse of wealth and to know that their king is wealthy. But this was not enough. The king then throws a huge party that lasts for 7 days. And all of the men in the kingdom were invited to this party, where the wine flowed like water. There were waiters at each person's elbow to refill their glass the minute it became empty. 7 days. What do you think that was like? I'm envisioning frat parties. Who can drink for 7 days like that? Certainly not me. And the Queen Vashti, is also having a party for the ladies, but we don't hear any of the details about her party. At the men's party, these men who have been drinking for 7 days start talking about their wives. And the king is not to be outdone by anyone else talking about how beautiful their wife was. The king says, "My wife, Queen Vashti, is the most beautiful woman in the kingdom." And to prove it, he sent some of his servants to get her, to tell her to come to the men's party wearing her crown. Only her crown. Think about that. Queen Vashti has been commanded to appear before every drunken man at this party wearing only a crown. Ladies, would you do it? Vashti knew that if she said no, the consequences would be harsh. They could even include execution. But she decided to say no. That's actually the only word that Vashti says in this whole scenario. No. I'm sure the servants were shocked. I'm sure they asked her to reconsider. I'm sure they begged her to reconsider, because they certainly wouldn't want to go back to the king without her. But they had no choice. She said no. Queen Vashti did the unthinkable. She stood up to the king who was behaving like a bully and said no. The story tells us that the king had a very high opinion of himself. Modern psychologists might call him narcissistic. And he's definitely a bully because he has given not one moment's thought to how this order would make his queen feel. He has given thought only to what he wants. And now, this man who has given no thought to how inappropriate his command is shocked at her refusal. And rather than give that a second thought, because after all, he's been drinking for 7 days, he decides to punish her for her refusal, for embarrassing him in front of the other men. He doubled down on her disrespect for him. His only concern was, what would the other men think of him if he couldn't control his own wife? And so he consulted the other drunken men for marital advice. What a great idea! Go to your drunk buddies to ask them what to do. They too were horrified because their thought was, they didn't care that the king was embarrassed. Their thought was, if their wives saw her say no, they might say no. Remember, this is a time when men owned their women. A biblical marriage included a woman's father giving the groom land, goats, camels. If livestock and property didn't change hands, it was not a biblical wedding. And so they decided that he should banish her from the kingdom. Remember, it's a huge kingdom. She can't be anywhere in that kingdom where the king might see her. She is banished. Because that's exactly what he did. And he sent out a proclamation to every one of these provinces that he rules that a man is the master of his house. Women must do what their husband says. Friends, the world is full of bullies, people who want their own way, no matter what the consequences are to others, no matter who is hurt. Nothing matters to them except getting what they want. And most of them will stop at pretty much nothing. And most of them would deny that they're bullies to their last breath. They believe they are right and everyone else is wrong. But the rest of us who are not bullies do not have to accept their bad behavior. Like Queen Vashti, we can simply say no. No, I'm not putting up with that behavior anymore. No, you are wrong. No, you are hurting people. No, we need to consider other ideas, other options. No, we need to hear other voices. No, the way we've always done things does not work, and we need to change. We might lose something. Our friends might not stand with us out of fear of the bullies. We might lose standing in our family, among our friends, and our community, and yes, even in our church. But our failure to say no means that we are losing our way. We are losing our self-respect, And in the church, it means we are losing God's voice as well as our own. I urge each of us today to look at our own behavior. And if we are exhibiting those bullying behaviors, we need to stop. Look also to see if you are helping the bullies around you to strengthen their bullying of others and you. When we fail to say no, we are telling the bullies around us, go ahead, it's all right, we don't care. Hit us with your best shot. We'll be nice and we'll say nothing. We'll let you do it forever. And when we do that, they continue to make the situation unbearable. Even though it's hard, when it comes to bullies, we can't change their behavior, but we can say no. Amen.